Gambling simulators. Wait, no. Gacha games are absolutely fascinating. Above gameplay, music, art style, or anything else, Gacha's main selling points are their characters. So why are these characters so often treated like trash? This video will mainly focus on women in Gachas, as I've already made a video talking about men. Link in the description, feel free to check it out. Let's not waste each other's time and get right into it. Female characters in gacha games are treated horribly in the vast majority of gacha games. Spoilers, obviously. This is Furina, a character from Genshin Impact, and without a doubt she is one of the best written characters in gacha history. Furina was created by the god of Hydra 500 years in the past. She was created for one sole purpose, to save the country called Fontaine by deceiving the true gods of the world by playing the role of the Hydro god. Every waking moment of her life, Furina, a mere puny mortal, had to convince the whole world she was the supreme god of Fontaine. She was not allowed a single moment of rest, a moment to catch her breath, a moment to take off the mask and just be her true self. No, for 500 years, she had to pretend loneliness, sorrow, doubt, paranoia, fear. Every agonizing second was torture. She had no one to rely on, for if a single soul found out the true gods would not be far behind, and Fontaine would be doomed. But she carried on, the pain unbearable, but her unwavering love for the people of Fontaine was greater still. And on one fateful day, the truth revealed, her people saved, Furina was finally truly born, and she would find her happily ever after. The story, writing, and performance of Furina was truly a masterclass. Whoa, wait a second. Wasn't this video about how women in gacha games are treated horribly? Why am I praising Furina? Simple, my dear friend. Furina is what we in the business like to call an exception. Well-written, complex, deep, or otherwise interesting characters are very uncommon in gacha games. In the vast majority of gachas, characters, female or otherwise, are incredibly poorly written. They suffer from many things: underdevelopment, poor execution of concepts, waifuification, developers not caring and making them nothing more than glorified dolls, etc., etc., etc. These problems result in characters being very one-note. This is the big boob mommy character. This is the low energy ice princess. This is the lolly. This is the goth, etc. Or it results in characters having a lot of potential to be deep, complex characters in theory, but in practice, they are nothing more than virtual eye candy. Examples of characters being one note or just otherwise underwhelming would be the cast of the vast majority of gachas that have existed, currently exist, and will exist in the future. To honestly take your pick, the recent Catgirl gacha that was released, Brave Frontier, Monster Strike, those 8 different gachas that I used to play in middle school a decade ago but can't remember the names of. Upcoming games like Project Mugen and Everness to Neverness will likely suffer from this problem as well, but that's just speculation. Often the cast from gachas have one, or if they're lucky, 2 paragraphs of lore and that's about it. They may make 1 or 2 short appearances in the story and then disappear forever. But why is that? Simple. Most gachas simply do not have the time to explore tens, if not hundreds of different characters. Gachas have very short update schedules. They get updated every 2, 3, or 6 weeks depending on the game. There is an ever-revolving door of new characters getting added to these types of games. And because of this, it's extremely difficult to find the time to meaningfully explore these characters. At one extreme end, you have a game like Brave Frontier. This game will always have a special place in my heart, but let's be honest, the story was bare bones, if not non-existent. There was an overarching long-term plot that slowly developed, but 99% of the cast did not make an appearance in it. Instead, they just had a short paragraph or 2 that explained their story, and that was about it. The developers didn't put much effort into their story. Instead, they focused on making good-looking designs and gameplay gimmicks. Majority of gachas, especially back in the early to mid 2010s, which is when Brave Frontier was in service, were like this. focusing mostly on presenting characters that you will hopefully like and spend money on, neglecting the story and characters. Characters weren't real characters, they were eye candy. Now, was this necessarily a problem back in the day? Well, it depends on what type of player you are. Gachas back then were mostly focused on the collection aspect, gameplay, story, music, and basically everything else was an afterthought. So the fact that characters, female or otherwise, were bare bones, underexplored, or just badly written wasn't seen as a problem because 90% of the player base simply didn't care about the story. Does this justify bad storytelling and characters? No. While people didn't have high expectations of gacha specifically, bad characters are still bad characters. The only real criticism I have of female characters in this era of gacha games is a universal criticism, which is simply that characters were very bare bones and boring back in the early days. At the other end, you have MiHoYo and a handful of other developers that actually care about their stories and characters, and most importantly, they try. MiHoYo games have a lot of flaws, but one thing I'll give them is that they make a clear effort to write good characters. Whether or not the main stories of their games are good/well written is another discussion entirely. I've already mentioned Furna, but you also have other characters like Nahida, Malvika, Arlecchino, Navia, my beloved Bronya, May, and Kiana. The upcoming Star Rail character, Fugue, has potential to be a really good, well-written, interesting character, so fingers crossed they don't mess it up. Nicole, Yanagi, and hopefully Miyabi when she releases in the future, these characters are well written, have interesting backstories, purposes in the main plot, good moment-to-moment dialogue, and are multifaceted characters. Of course, not every MiHoYo character is as well written as these characters. There are plenty of badly written as well as underdeveloped and underexplored characters. Do you remember Shin Yan? Yeah, no, me neither. She basically doesn't exist as far as MiHoYo is concerned. Even though she's been in the game since version 1.1. She was released in the first update, and 4 years later, they still haven't really done anything with her. And this problem ties into what I said earlier, which is the fact that a lot of gacha games simply don't have the time to really explore characters. My favorite example of a badly written character is the Raiden Shogun. She is the god of Electro, as well as the ruler of the land called Inazuma. She was released during the 1-year anniversary. However, she was slowly built up in the story from day one. We were given the impression that she was a brutal dictator, ruling over her people with an iron fist, to the point where a rebellion had formed to take her down. During the events of the Inazuma arc, we participated in the rebellion and we sort of succeeded. She didn't die or anything, instead she turned a new leaf, becoming less of a dictator. Sort of. It's revealed that there's 2 versions of Raiden. The brutal dictator is actually a puppet created by the real Raiden. Its purpose was to protect Inazuma at all costs. The real Raiden is in reality an awkward, milk-loving NEET that for some reason we go on a 1-hour-long date with during her first story quest. Instead of spending time learning from a powerful, ruthless leader god that was present 500 years ago in the past during a very important moment in history, which our main character wants to learn more about, instead of talking about that, instead, we basically teach a 1,000-year-old god what a light novel is and give her a milkshake. Luckily, her writing and story improved with time, but her first impressions were abysmal. Her second story quest was actually really good. Personally, one of my favorite story quests in the game. The reason for this is a process I like to call waifu-ication, a process where a female character that was originally a deep, complex character is slowly or suddenly turned into a potential love interest candidate for the main character. Very often in gachas, female characters that have the potential to be fleshed out are turned into generic wife material in order to sell fantasy to the player, in the hopes that they will spend more money on the game. A salvageable example of this would be Wuthering Waves. The story for this game so far is mediocre, let's be honest. But something I find really interesting is the fact that a lot of the women have either implied or just straight up confirmed romantic feelings for the main character. It makes sense for the shorekeeper, but everyone else is just nonsensical. For some reason, even if a female character doesn't have romantic feelings for the main character, they have to have a romantic moment with the main character. It's really odd once you notice it. Wuthering has a serious problem of women just falling in love with the main character and that being a heavy focus of their story. It hasn't gotten to the point where that is their sole purpose, luckily, but I do worry that the game will continue to disservice the women by always having to make them have romantic feelings, no matter how pointless and dumb. Remember Firefly from Star Rail? Remember how we went on a 2-hour-long date with her during version 2.0? Remember how she was set up to be a super important complex character? Remember how she didn't really do anything for the entirety of the Penacony story? She kind of just followed us around, talking about how a cat told her she was gonna die, and when she released in version 2.3, the story barely did anything with her? We talked to her for a bit about her death, and then she sacrificed herself to stop a bomb. Oh wait, no, never mind, she's still alive. What could have been a cool, no-nonsense badass in a power suit was instead just a girl who seemingly has feelings for the main character. The romance wouldn't even be a problem if the story also explored any other aspect of her as well, as much as they did the romantic aspect. But sadly, they only lightly touched on her greater narrative. The scenes with her and Blade in the car were pretty good, and hopefully she'll come back in the future and we will be able to actually focus on her main core story rather than just have her flirt with the main character a lot. But honestly, I'm not holding my breath. Firefly is an example of a female character having a lot of potential, but sadly being reduced to nothing more than wife material. An all too common phenomenon. Luckily, we got Robin, who so far has been a pretty good character, and with her brother's Sunday releasing soon, I can only hope her writing remains consistently high quality. Slowly over time, the writing of gachas has become a higher priority for developers. When exactly it started, I can't say for certain, but the oldest game I can think of which had a focus on its story was Fate Grand Order. Footage not found because I refuse to play this game again. Fate has some of the best characters gachas have to offer. Castoria, anyone? Not only was the story mode high quality, the writing was top tier. Characters have great moment-to-moment writing with great characterization, and some had long-term character arcs. But Fate is also a good example of an issue I mentioned earlier. This game has a lot of characters. Realistically, it's difficult for the developers to deeply explore and make every character super complex and interesting. So a lot of characters are fairly one-note, having some sort of gimmick. Tsundere, Big Titty Mommy, Ice Princess, whatever else I said earlier. Now, is this necessarily a problem? No. There is a big difference between a character being one-note / boring and being badly written or sexist. And from what I have experienced of Fate Grand Order, I wouldn't really say any individual character is straight up sexist or horribly written. At worst, I would just say some characters are way less interesting than others, but that's about it. But hey, if you have played Fate Grand Order and you can't think of extremely badly written or just straight up sexist characters, feel free to tell me in the comments. Speaking of badly written, I'm about to blow your mind, but making deep, complex, well-written characters is difficult, more so when you are in a tight time window. So in my opinion, what matters is that developers actively try to make deep, complex characters, regardless of whether or not they succeed. Sadly, because of the tight time window and ever-revolving door of new playable characters and NPCs, new locations, new villains and plot points, etc., most developers don't even bother trying. Instead, they just make a bunch of waifu bait. At best, these characters are very simple that remain stagnant forever, or at worst, they go out of their way to be misogynistic and sexist. Snowbreak Containment Zone is a game I will be talking about a couple of times because, oh dear lord, where do I even begin? Long story short, this was a game that when it was released was fairly tame in its character designs and story with a nice tactical aesthetic. Being a futuristic game where you fight weird monsters and human factions, and it massively bombed to the point where it was on the cusp of shutting down. However, slowly through the course of a couple of updates, the game leaned more and more into extreme fan service. Character designs as well as the story took a hard left turn. I'll talk about designs later. For now, let's focus on the story. This change in philosophy brought in a new audience that was big enough to keep the game from shutting down. Once again, I'll talk about this more later on. The writing of the story in the beginning left much to be desired. It wasn't necessarily bad, rather it was just overwhelmingly mediocre. However, while that was the case, the story did have some interesting concepts that, given time and better writing, could create a really interesting world to explore. Life and Fenny were old friends and rivals that participated in a battle competition. Life was a serious, cold, no-nonsense warrior. Fenny was her opposite, hot-headed and full of herself, demanding to be treated like the queen she knows she is. Life's core motivation was to eradicate the monsters that killed her family and threatened to destroy the world. She would gladly do whatever was asked of her to accomplish this simple life's purpose. Fenny also fought to protect the world but was lacking a core motivation. She didn't know what her long-term goal was. Sure, they weren't super original characters, but they were decently written and fun to watch interact with each other and others. However, once the change in core philosophy occurred, not only did these two change for the worse, but so did every other playable character in the game. Suddenly, with no explanation in the story itself, Fenny became a low self-esteem mess. She questioned everything about herself. Why was she here? Why did she feel so much weaker than everyone else? How could she even consider herself life's rival when she was so much better than herself? Why was she such a coward? And for some reason, she suddenly fell in love with the self-insert main character? Even though she previously had zero romantic feelings for him, and nothing happened in the story to justify her falling in love. Life suddenly stopped being an ice cream. Suddenly, she became oddly full of herself, acting like she was better than Fenny, even though previously their rivalry was mostly one-sided from Fenny. And while she originally did clearly have a strong connection to the main character, things were kept strictly professional. Suddenly, she started throwing herself at the main character, to the point where canonically, in the main story, Life, the MC, and Fenny get married, an official throuple. Snowbreak is the best modern example of the waifuification phenomenon. Everything that made Fenny, Life, and every other playable character unique was suddenly completely changed. Every woman suddenly fell in love with the main character, and canonically, they all have sex with him. The ultimate weeaboo gacha power fantasy. Now I could move on to my next point, but I won't. Instead, I want to talk about the character Cirrus. Cirrus was introduced in the first update. We learned that in the past she was best friends with another playable character, Chen Sheng. However, an incident occurred that caused Cirrus to lose her memory, as well as giving her a horrible memory that would cause her to forget things. Because of this, she carried around a recorder so she could record important pieces of information. After version 1.1, she disappeared from the story, eventually returning in version 1.8. This time, similarly to every other character, she suddenly was madly in love with the main character, constantly throwing herself at him. The story had many instances of her holding hands, hugging, and kissing the main character. Worst of all, at the end of the 1.8 story, Cirrus was given a special recording that had extremely important information about her past. However, instead of listening to the recording and continuing her story, she gave the recording to the main character. The reason for this was that she no longer cared about her past. From now on, she only wanted to remember things about him and stand by his side. Basically, they completely dropped her original story in order to turn her into another sex doll. What about her best friend Chen Sheng? Well, something absolutely insane happened with that plot point. Back during version 1.6, players noticed something odd. Chen Sheng's character description was altered. No longer was she and Cirrus best friends. Instead, they just vaguely knew each other in the past. And not only that, Chen Sheng and Cirrus never interacted in the version 1.8 storyline. Why did this happen? Simple. The developers changed it because players thought Cirrus and Chen Sheng being friends was cheating on the main character. Yeah, you heard me right. Just ignore the fact that at this point, Cirrus and Chen Sheng were not dating, and neither of them had romantic feelings for the main character. Also, ignore that the main character is constantly flirting with every other woman with a pulse, and canonically having sex with them. Snowbreak is oddly sexist. Apparently, women simply aren't allowed to be friends, and obviously, all of them are horny dogs that constantly throw themselves at their military commander, and are completely fine with him going around and having sex with other women, and canonically they are okay with marrying him and joining the harem. It is insane, dude. Oh my god, what happened with Snowbreak is such a crazy story. Oh my I'm sorry. Oh god, I need to talk about Snowbreak, dude. I need to make like a dedicated video because god, man, anyways, because he's just that much of a Chad, I guess. The problem with Snowbreak isn't necessarily that the women are badly written, it's the fact that the writers took well-rounded characters and forcibly turned them into mindless dolls. The game at the beginning wasn't the best written gacha game ever created, far from it, but it was decent. There was a lot of potential there, and the developers just threw it all away. If the characters were badly written from the beginning, I wouldn't be as upset by the change as I ended up being. One of the reasons I quit the game was because all of the characters that I had slowly started to care about were ruined. A big reason as to why a lot of gachas have horrible storytelling is because a lot of developers want to make fan service games. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with a developer wanting to make a fan service game. But what a lot of developers fail to realize is that you can have a heavy fan service game that also has a good story and well-written female cast. The best example of this is the sadly shut down gacha called Destiny Child, which was released all the way back in 2016 and shut down in 2022. I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Destiny Child was my favorite gacha of all time. And one of the core reasons was the amazing story. This was one of the most degenerate gachas to ever exist. And I'm not gonna lie, the reason I started playing it was because of the fan service. But even though characters were incredibly sexualized, and I will talk about character designs later on in the video, the developers put in a lot of effort to make well-rounded characters. Some of the best, most in-depth, interesting characters I've seen in a gacha. Arhat, Niridi, Calamarati, Eve, Bafori, Teresa, Kubaba, Semele, Mona, Lisa, Davi, and Aurora, to name a few of my favorites. The main character was a demon and Arhat was an exorcist that tried to kill him. When she failed, she underwent a massive character arc where alongside Niridi and Calamarati joined forces with the main character to form a new organization to help humanity from the dangerous demons and corrupt church. The writing, voice acting, music, emotions, everything was a masterclass. And that was only one character arc. Some of my personal favorite stories were the Vanished Twin, Childhood's End arc, Wounded Winter arc, Kubaba's Search for Babel, and Mitra's Return arc. I want to tell you one of my favorite moments in the entire story. During the Childhood's End arc, the main character who went by Master lost the battle and was heavily injured. This caused him to undergo a transformation and lose his memories. This moment changed the story forever. It was a massive turning point, and I would love to do a deep dive into why this is such an amazing moment, but let's move on. The important part is that he lost all of his previous memories, but for some reason also remembered something he had forgotten a long time ago. His real name, Mitra, or Mitra, I'm actually not sure how you pronounce it. He was eventually healed by another demon called Ziva, a friend. Months later, once he was ready, he left Ziva's house since he didn't remember her and didn't trust her. In fact, he didn't trust anyone. Ziva told him where he used to live, so that's where he went, since he didn't really have any other option. Once he arrived, he met a woman named Aurora. She was a being created by a pact he made with a human. Essentially, she was one of his servants, aka playable characters. Before he lost his memories, he used to have many, many servants, but now she was the only one that remained. All the others were gone. Some left because they thought Mitra abandoned them, others were forced into hiding because other demons tried to enslave them, and others left for different reasons. Aurora, however, remained. Her faith was unwavering, her loyalty eternal. She knew Mitra would return one day, even after many, many months. But even though Mitra was standing in front of her, he was fundamentally different. She couldn't sense him. She wasn't sure who he was, and since he lost his memories, he didn't recognize her either. But Aurora, deep down in her heart, knew it was him. She had no proof and she couldn't explain how she knew. She just did. After this encounter, Mitra eventually came across some other servants, old friends, and even Arhat, but none of them knew who he was, or he them. But Aurora remained steadfast in her claim that he was her master. Eventually, Mitra has a full-blown meltdown, overwhelmed with everything that was happening, which mind you, there is hours of story content I'm leaving out. Everything was simply too much for him. At the end of his rope, he screamed at Aurora, questioning why she stuck around and why she believed in him so much. Aurora, without an ounce of doubt or hate, simply told Mitra that although she had no proof and she couldn't explain it, deep down she knew he was her old master, the man that loved and cherished each and every servant he had, the man that would lay down his life for them without a moment's hesitation, even if he never regained his memories, even if he never trusted her, even if he hated her, she would stand by his side for eternity because she believed in him. She believed in the good man he used to be. Having heard that, Mitra finally remembered something. He remembered her. He remembered Aurora. He said her name and broke down crying. Aurora, seeing this, didn't say a word. She simply held him in her arms. And oh my god, I'm getting emotional. It was so good, bro. Oh my god. Destiny Child, you were taken from us too soon. I will never forgive Shiftup for shutting down this game. It was so good. Oh, I'm sorry. I've never talked to anybody about this goddamn game, and I'm gonna use this opportunity to finally do it. I'm sorry. Oh god. A lot of developers don't put much effort into their stories. Some games have virtually no story, others have badly written stories. Many are oddly sexist, and I believe the reason for this is because story and character quality is not seen as important. There seems to be this idea that the only thing that matters in gacha games are the character designs and rewards. I fundamentally do not agree with this notion. While yes, character designs are important, a good story can add so much to a game. If you were introduced to gachas back in 2020 with the release of Genshin Impact, you may not know this, but most gachas that are released get shut down 1 or 2 years after they release. Most of the games I'm referring to no longer exist, which is why I'm just vaguely talking about games, because a lot of the examples I would talk about normally just don't exist anymore. I don't remember what most of them are even called because they were so bad that I just don't remember anything about them. I remember that the characters sucked because they were just horribly written. The story was either non-existent or horribly told. I just remember that these games were garbage. But I don't remember anything about them because there's nothing to remember. They're not memorable. So I can't even search them up on Google just to find random pictures or screenshots or gameplay videos on YouTube or anything like that. So sorry if this video is kind of weird, but I'm trying my best. I'm working with what I got. In any given year, at least 20 different gachas are released, and 15 of them get shut down soon after. If you ever wondered why anniversaries, especially 1-year anniversaries, are so hyped up, this is why. Because there is no guarantee a random gacha you play and enjoy will survive for many years to come. Part of the reasons these gachas fail is because regardless of whether or not they have good character designs, players don't care about the games enough to stick around. Having the player form a strong emotional connection through good world building, character writing, and arcs and emotional culmination would have helped these games survive, making the typically all-female cast actually well-rounded individuals would drastically help. MiHoYo, for all their faults, is a golden example of that. People heavily underestimate how much of a boon a good story with well-written characters can be. A good character design can get a player's foot on the door, but if you truly want your average player to spend an extortionate amount of money, make them care about the story and character. Characters like Furina are so successful because players were able to form a strong bond with her. Yes, she's also a strong character, but her story gave her that extra push she needed to be massively successful. I mentioned this earlier, but things are changing. As the years go by, more and more gachas are trying to be well written. They may not always succeed, but I'd rather developers try and fail than to not try at all. Anyways, hope you enjoyed that short, not in-depth discussion about gacha stories. Now let's talk about female character designs. Oh boy. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, character designs are one of, if not the most important aspect of gacha games. Dailies, story missions, side quests, battle passes, every piece of content gachas have circle back to help you summon for new characters and make them stronger. And summoning for new characters helps you clear whatever new piece of content that gets released every update. It's a perfect circle, a perfect feedback loop. Because of this, gachas put a lot of effort into making characters as visually pleasing as possible. Throughout your life, I'm sure you've heard of the famous marketing phrase, sex sells, a phrase that 90% of gachas swear by. It is extremely common for your average gacha to only have female characters, and for said characters to be borderline, if not completely naked. There is a very commonly held belief that men do not sell in gacha games. That belief is why the vast majority of gachas either only have female characters or have a 90-10 split that heavily favors women. This is completely false, but I won't be talking about why in this video. Refer to my Men in Gachas video to hear more about this specific topic. Link in description. There's also a belief that in order for a gacha to be successful, the women need to be scantily clad or completely naked. Is this true? Yes, but also no. The truth is that it is a very complicated topic. Throughout the history of gachas, the most consistently successful gachas have been the ones with a healthy balance of a wide variety of character designs. Brave Frontier had women, monsters, and men in cool armor or various fun clothing, as well as various degrees of undress, and it worked. During its time, Brave Frontier was one of the most successful and popular gachas on the market. Fate Grand Order during the mid-2010s was the first true gacha mega success, and once again, it had a wide variety of designs. To this day, two of the most iconic and popular Fate women, Artoria and Jeanne d'Arc, are both completely covered up in elaborate armored dresses, but then you also have very scantily clad women, some are in bikini or wearing very revealing outfits like dresses or other such things, but once again, it works. Often, but not always, the designs of these characters make sense for who they are inspired by, because in case you didn't know, Fate Grand Order characters are based off of real-world fictional characters or real-world, real-life people that existed. The modern-day titan that is MiHoYo ever since Genshin released has found massive success by giving the various women in their core 3 gachas either well-thought-out, intricate clothing or some fairly revealing outfits, rather than focusing entirely on giving them very risque clothing like they did during their early days. This shift in focus has helped them become the most successful gacha developer currently on the market. These 3 simple examples alone prove that developers do not need to rely on hyper fan service in order to be successful. With that established, let's take a closer look into this topic. Earlier I mentioned that Snowbird Containment Zone was on the cusp of being shut down, but a shift into Giga fan service helped it earn more money to stay alive. Characters went from futuristic military outfits into skin-tight bodysuits, bikinis, nurse outfits, and other fanservice outfits. A lot of the community constantly goes around the greater Gacha community bragging about how Snowbreak proved that sex sells, and that other Gacha should also walk the same path. As someone who started playing Snowbreak during the beta and quit during the first anniversary, I can tell you that there's more to the story than meets the eye. Most of the community will tell you that the reason Snowbreak failed was because of the military character designs. They were too covered up and players didn't like that. While yes, some players didn't like these designs, the real reason the game failed had nothing to do with that. The main complaints players had was the lackluster story, lack of content, lack of marketing, and extremely buggy launch. The mobile version specifically was borderline unplayable. And while yes, some people didn't like the military outfits, there were plenty of people who did. For example, me personally, even though I do like fanservice designs, and I liked plenty of the revealing outfits in the game, up until I decided to quit, one of my top 3 favorite designs in the game was the 4-star version of Life. I thought her blue military outfit looked amazing. Not only that, there is a very specific reason the shift into fanservice was so successful. During the time Snowbreak shifted its core design philosophy, a very popular Chinese-only gacha game was embroiled in controversy. The players of Girls Frontline 2 had decided to boycott the game because of something that happened in the story. A character returning from the first Girls Frontline, Day Yan, or something like that, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, had a story where she was implied to be in some sort of relationship with a different character named Mr. Raymond. He was an NPC. The self-insert main character from the first game, the Commander, was not mentioned once in her story. Because of this, Chinese players were mad because Day Yan was clearly cheating on them. Not the Commander, but themselves, the real-world human being. Mind you, Day Yan was not in a relationship with the Commander, she was just one of the playable characters. But the game focused a lot on Master Love fanservice, so players deluded themselves into believing that they are in a real relationship with this collection of pixels. This controversy resulted in many players boycotting the game and moving on to Snowbreak specifically. That is where most of the new player base for Snowbreak came from. It had nothing to do with the shift into fanservice. Snowbreak was chosen for 2 main reasons. First, although Girls Frontline and Snowbreak have different gameplay styles, Frontline is an XCOM inspired strategy game, Snowbreak is a third-person shooter. Both have a military aesthetic and have a focus on fanservice, so there was a connection between the 2 games, albeit very loose. And second, it was the right game at the right time. Because it was still early in its lifespan, playing Snowbreak was seen as a low commitment. People tested it out because why not? The truth is that the shift into philosophy was only successful because of the Frontline 2 controversy. If that never happened, Snowbreak would have continued to lose money and shut down within its first year, regardless of the swan dive into depravity. The reason I can confidently say this is because to this day, the game still isn't very successful. The game only makes roughly $5 million a month. Yes, it's making enough money to keep the light on nowadays, but it is far from the mega rebirth, the mega success that proves that fan service is needed in gacha games. Sex sells is a very flawed concept. Sure, sexualized female designs can be super successful, but they can also completely and utterly fail. The default setting for gachas is hyper fan service. Earlier I mentioned that roughly 20 if not more gacha games release every year, and yes, I was being hyperbolic, but a lot of gacha games do release every year, and yet a majority of them immediately fail because sexy women do not make a game worth playing. In order to be successful, you need more than just women in bikinis. Gameplay, music, story, the whole shebang. But sadly, 99% of gachas are boring as hell and horribly made. Brain-dead idle clickers with no substance. They rely entirely on horny bait to make a profit. Not only do they rely heavily on bikinis, but also sexualized versions of outfits like maids, nurses, schoolgirls, etc. These designs infest the gacha market. Personally, after over a decade of playing gachas, I am beyond tired of constantly seeing the exact same designs regurgitated over and over and over again. This idea that the only thing that matters is sexy women has led to the problem that most gachas are simply absolute trash and not worth playing. Now, I want to be clear, there's nothing inherently wrong with developers making or someone playing a super fanservice game. To claim otherwise would make me a hypocrite considering my history. Once again, Exhibit A, Destiny Child. Mature content has existed for as long as humanity has. My main problem is the stagnation and low quality of quote unquote mature gachas, as well as the false narrative that gachas need fan service. But enough beating around the bush. Why does this narrative exist? Simple, waifu culture. Before Genshin Impact made gachas more mainstream, most people who played these types of games were anime fans, and let's be honest, most anime fans don't really care about quality. If it has bright, flashy colors and pretty anime women, fans will throw unfathomable amounts of money at a game. Let's be honest, the vast majority of anime video games aren't good. There's like a handful of them that are. Vast majority of them, 95%, are absolute trash. And yet, anime fans will still buy them because hey, look at that, it's Goku. Ever since Genshin's release, there's been a loud, angry group of old guard gacha fans that feel like their space is being invaded. They feel like the fanservice games that they love are being abandoned in favor of more general audience games, even though there are still plenty of fanservice games being released every year. In their anger, they violently lash out and attack other people because they are tourists, aka fake fans. They're not real fans like the people who love half-naked women. Basically, it's a situation of an obscure thing becoming popular and the old fans wanting things to remain the same. However, don't be fooled. If you spend a lot of time online, it might seem like there is a massive group of old fans constantly hating and attacking new fans, but that is far from the truth. In reality, these people are nothing more than a small, very loud echo chamber. My personal grievance with this echo chamber is that they have a very narrow idea of what a gacha game can be. They refuse to accept that a gacha game can be more than just a collection of pretty anime girls. That being said, this hate is not one-sided. There's also a second echo chamber of people who despise any form of fan service character designs. These people claim that gacha games are inherently exploitative and constantly sexualizing women. Now, this claim is not entirely wrong, but it's not entirely correct either. The vast majority of gacha games do sexualize women, that is just a fact. However, there is a core problem with these people's argument. Often, a woman showing any form of skin, regardless of how much or context, gets labeled as bad. Often these people lack nuance in their claims. Is a bikini inherently sexual? In my opinion, no. A bikini can be sexual, but it's also a completely normal thing to wear at the beach. So is releasing a bikini skin in a game inherently exploitative? No, but also yes. I think it depends on the context. Let's take Fate Grand Order for example. Every year in the summer, they have a big summer update where they release a new fun summer story, events, and game modes, and most importantly, characters and skins for men and women. But again, let's focus on women. The skins are usually some type of bikini or piece of clothing that someone would typically wear to the beach. With this context, I do not consider these designs to be exploitative. Believe it or not, real women in the real world wear bikinis to the beach. Blasphemous, I know. Given the proper context, I don't think half-naked women are a bad thing. Granted, the only reason the summer events exist is in order to sell bikinis, but still, nuance. But then we have a situation like Raiden Shogun from Genshin Impact. Yes, I'm talking about her again. Raiden is wearing a kimono. Kinda. In case you've never seen one before or just forgot what they look like, this is what a real kimono from Japan looks like. As you can see, it completely covers the person from head to toe. Now again, this is what Raiden looks like. As you can see, she is showing a lot of skin. And in this situation, yes, this is a sexualized design. For all intents and purposes, she is wearing a slutty kimono. Back when Raiden was first revealed, there was a sizable amount of backlash from players. a decent chunk of the player base was upset because they expected Raiden's design to be either more elegant or battle ready. Raiden had been mentioned in the story ever since it launched and was described to be a powerful, ruthless ruler of a Japan inspired region. So when she was revealed to just be a woman in a slutty kimono, there was some understandable disappointment from some players. Personally, I would have preferred if she was wearing armor, either samurai style or something similar to her boss fight version. And no, she did not need to be covered up from head to toe in armor, she could still show some skin, but given the context of her character, it just feels weird that she would wear something like this. This is Yaimiko, and she is a shrine maiden. This is what a real shrine maiden looks like, and again, Miko is basically wearing a Spirit Halloween costume. Yes, this is sexualized. While yes, gachas do have a problem with over-sexualizing women, the solution is not to make everyone wear a parka like a lot of the oddly conservative echo chamber wants. Showing some skin is not inherently a bad thing. My personal grievance with this oddly conservative echo chamber is how hypocritical it is. They claim to hate sexualization, but these same people will drool over half-naked men and talk about how gachas need more sexy men. And I mean, hey, and just say the most out-of-pocket things about sexy men. If you claim to hate sexualization so much, keep that same energy when referring to men. If you don't, then I simply will ignore everything you say because you are a blatant hypocrite. When designing a character, something you must consider is the characterization, story, and personality of the character. Does it make sense for your character to wear a bunny suit? If the answer is yes, then I don't think it's a problem for a woman to wear one. If the answer is no, then yes, it is blatant sexualization and potentially character assassination. Obviously, regardless of the answer, the real reason the bunny suit exists is because it's easy money, but again, given proper context, I don't think that's a bad thing. A big problem with the discussion of sexualization is how extreme some people can be. There are some people who genuinely believe showing any amount of skin is a bad thing. They will look at a design like Furina and say that her legs being exposed is a bad thing. Also, there's the weird body shaming aspect of it. When someone looks at a character like Chlorine and says that her having big breasts is a problem, I can't help but think that that person is stupid. Real women in the real world have naturally big breasts, so no, a video game character having big breasts is not a bad thing. Recently, the soon-to-release 5-star version of Herta from Star Rail was revealed, and as I was randomly scrolling through TikTok because I am sad and lonely, I saw this. The female design curse. What is that? I haven't the foggiest idea because nobody will tell me. This person and the ones who agreed with them just vaguely gesture to fan service, even though this design is literally just a grown-up version of the original 4-star Herta. And that is what I hate so much about both echo chambers. There is a discussion worth having about sexualization in gachas, but when both sides are constantly engaging in bad faith criticism, it muddies the water. The good faith discussion gets drowned out, ignored, and forgotten. The reason I like Destiny Child so much is because it had the best of both worlds. Not only did it have some incredible fan service designs, it had cool, beautiful, elegant, and unique designs, on top of one of the best narratives and voice acting and music in all of gacha history. And no, I will not hear otherwise. I am right, you are wrong if you do not agree with me. This game did what countless gachas have failed to do. Try. And I think that's the biggest problem with gachas as a type of game. A lot of studios make gachas not because they have a strong passion for this type of gaming, but because if they are successful, they will drown in money. After all, these types of games can be disgustingly profitable. Sexualization and how damaging it is to women is a very complex topic, and of course, not only am I one person, I am a man. So hey, I tried my best to explore this topic. I could keep going and give more and more examples, but at the end of the day, The core message I want you to take away from this is that character design and storytelling is a complex situation. There is no good and bad, black and white answer. Everything is gray. And if you agree with what I've said throughout the course of this video, cool, awesome. If you don't agree, cool, awesome. There is no right or wrong answer. As such, feel free to share your own opinions down in the comments. I would love to read what you have to say. Trust me, there is so much more I could talk about when it comes to this topic, but at some point, I would just be talking in circles and this video needs to end eventually. At the end of the day, regardless of your opinion about gacha games, if you like fanservice, hate it, or are somewhere in between, the best thing you can do is vote with your wallet. Play and support what you like. If you love Star Rail, awesome, play it. Spend money to summon for Sunday and Herda, make fan art, tell your friends to play it, cosplay, engage with the community. If you like fan service, awesome, play Destiny Child. Oh wait, you can't do that anymore. I'm never gonna get over it. It's been 2 years and I'm still sad. Play Snowbreak, spend money, make fan art, tell your friends. Well, okay, maybe don't do that because Snowbreak sucks, but still, support the games that you like. At the end of the day, that's all any of us can do. It's okay to like fan service, it's okay to not like it. Just please don't hate each other because of your opinion on the topic. Talk to and treat each other with basic human decency and respect. Hey everyone, Vladimir here. Hope you enjoyed the video. I would really appreciate it if you guys left a like, dislike, comment, subscribe, or don't. It's up to you. And if you somehow aren't sick of my voice yet, then feel free to watch one of my other videos. Just press on one of the videos on the screen. Either way, thank you so much for watching and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.